Akala to talk about your first graphic novel, The Ruins of Empires. We just saw a performance of it today at the Gate Theatre, a read-through with some other actors. And I would just want to welcome you to Soulheights and try and get to know a little bit more behind what you were thinking, what you were trying to convey with this latest work of yours.
I actually originally wrote it in the first incarnation of the story back in 2008. It's inspired by a book of the same title by a French scholar called C.F. Wanley. And it's essentially about an archetype, a knowledge seeker. The kind of person that questions society, questions power, goes through life really trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And we follow this knowledge seeker who has an out-of-body experience, maybe astral projection you could call it, you know, astral travel, has an out-of-body experience and is able to experience human history from outside of his body.
His physical self, yeah.
Basically as a spirit entity looking down on the globe almost as if it was a film. And guided by the genius, which is another spirit entity, a kind of all-seeing, all-wise spirit entity, or maybe just a wise ancestor. Guided by the genius, who is a feminine energy, she talks him through this history and talks him through the shortcomings of humanity. And I don't want to give away the end of the story, but really it's about provoking people to think about why in thousands of years humans have not matured beyond the level of empire as a form of organisation. Basically, which is armed piracy as national policy. You've got some stuff, we want your stuff, we're going to organise our army, kill your people and take your stuff. And we're going to call it democracy, or we'll call it this, or we'll call it that. But nonetheless, you got some shit we want, and we're going to mug you. It's an extended mugging trip. And then we're going to moralise about people who steal wallets. This is the kind of stupidity.
And we're going to rewrite the history to make it, to glamorise what we're doing.
Every empire does that. It makes themselves look better. And that includes people from the countries that today are victims of empire also. Empires in Africa and Asia and elsewhere also have a history that we don't often deal with. The problem is the issue is when you're told you have no history, you become very defensive, and sometimes often there can be a romanticism and people only look at the positive parts. Of say pre-colonial African history, for example, you get sort of a romantic. No, but I get that. When you've been told your people are eternally stupid,
you feel like you have
at first you don't want any bad information. You just want to say everything was wonderful in Kemet, and everything was great in before Europeans and Arabs turned up and we was all swimming and you make up mythology. Then as you get a bit more historically mature, you're like, yes, Kemet came with the foundation of literature. Yes, Kemet came with the foundation of philosophy and religion, and the Greeks studied there. It also came up with centralized empire and monarchy. We can't have our cake and eat it. We can't say we civilized other groups of people, which I don't believe in as a term, but we can't talk about only the positive contributions of Africa and Asia to the world, because African and Asians are capable of being mad people too. But I've tried to be fair whilst not losing sight of the fact that we currently live in a Western-led white supremacist age of capitalist empire. That's what I live in and that's what I know.
The reality right now.
So I can be honest and try and reflect on, well, the Moors occupied Spain for 800 years. That did play a role in the evolution of Western empire, whether we want to admit it or not. That's a reality. Who taught the Spanish and the Portuguese to navigate? Again, we've got to ask those questions. But we do live in the midst or the legacy of one particular type or form of empire that has proven itself to be arguably the most brutal ever. What will replace it, we don't know. But really it's asking that question about empire and glorifying resistance to empire. I make no bones about it. I believe in self-defense wholeheartedly. If someone comes in your house and tries to kill your kids, as far as I'm concerned, any system that penalises you for killing that person is a lunatic system. What the hell are you doing in my house trying to trouble my youth? So I believe in self-defense as national. And in fact, it is within the UN Declaration of Human Rights that people have the right to physical resistance to oppression. So even when people say, oh, but you can't, no, one second, even within the UN, even if we take the UN as a body that we have faith in, which is not necessarily something I believe, but if we do take that, even within the UN, you have the legal right to resist oppression.
I hear that.
And so that I am glorifying the legal right to violently resist oppression.
So are you trying to incite revolution? Is that what you want? Is that what you hope people come to, this idea of resisting the authority, the powers that be as they stand?
Well, it depends what you mean when you say revolution. Revolution is permanent, irreversible change. That's how some people. I mean, we definitely need that. We live in a world where billions of people don't have the basics. I believe we have a duty to resist unjust power, even if that power cloaks itself in legality. I'm just naturally a rebel. My mum raised me that way. My parents didn't lead a good example. They just weren't really having it.
Yeah.
And so I've always been the kind of person from the age of like 5, when school teachers were chatting egg and fart, to be like, miss, that's just not true. Like, why are you chatting rubbish to me? Like, I watched a documentary that don't talk. I'm not stupid. I might be 7,
but I still know what I'm talking about.
So I've always been the kind of person that tries to challenge bullshit when I see it.
I think coming on back to that point, that idea of challenging authority even from a child and rebelling against what you see is not right. How do you see that as actually being an example to live? Because a lot of the times you rebel, you're put in prison. You rebel, you're ostracized. You rebel, you're vilified. So that rebellion doesn't always come with power. It doesn't always come with the actual change that you're trying to achieve. So historically we see people who've rebelled and they've been killed, as you mentioned in your Q&A.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of a fear amongst a lot of people who, even though they can see that things need to change, the choice of resistance is kind of seen to kind of maybe go more within the system and try and change it from the inside out. Maybe try and get some of your own power financially or economically, and then try and affect change that way, because your voice is not necessarily going to be heard as an individual just rebelling.
Individuals can't stage any real rebellion.
This is what I'm
rebellion is collective.
Yeah.
Now, part of it is the way we're educated. So we're educated to believe in one great man history.
Yeah, which isn't the case.
Abraham Lincoln, William Wilberforce, even with the Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King. As Stokely Carmichael pointed out, Martin Luther King on his own in Alabama talking out about segregation would have just been one dead black. That's all he would have been. He would have been Martin Luther dead.
It's a mess.
Right? But surrounding him with thousands of people that believed in the same things changed America irrevocably. Black people are still having a bloody hard time in America, but white people cannot no longer say, you're a nigger, you're not allowed to shit in my toilet. From the foundation of America until 1965, white supremacy was law, with a brief period in the 1860s called Reconstruction. But we won't get into that because that's another debate, another lecture for another day, right? But the idea that white people were superior was law, really even from 1619 in some ways, but that's all technicalities, right? That law was broke, so now racism, even though it still exists and still clear, at least has to try and be covert. And that's work. It's difficult when you hate black people to not be allowed to just say, I hate black people and I want to kill them. But that doesn't negate the resistance and the things that have changed. Does that make sense? Yeah. Just like people in Jamaica, lots of people, the masses in Jamaica are still quite poor, right? There's a lot of violence in Jamaica. It ain't slavery though. And without physical resistance, without Sam Sharp or Paul Bogle and any of the Maroons, there's absolutely no reason to believe England would have said, all this money from slavery is just boring. Let's just set the Africans free. I mean, only a dumb person would even suggest that. But that's the way we're sold the history. Some great white man called William Wilberforce suddenly had an epiphany and black people got set free. But in reality, if all the Africans in the New World had sat down, twiddling their thumbs saying slavery's cool, let's just cut cane and pick cotton,
we'd still be there.
Right. What happened was the combination of factors, the changing nature of capitalism, resistance within the empire itself, and of course primarily the fact that we burnt down so many goddamn plantations and chopped up so many slave masters. There was like, this just ain't worth the hassle no more. It's not enough profit in it to justify the risk of these crazy Africans burning down our house and chopping our heads off.
But that's the point actually, because historically a lot of these rebellions are often accompanied by mass violence. Do you feel like that's an inevitability? Have we not evolved to a point where we can overthrow things without that?
No. Power only respects an equal and opposite power.
But then don't you become the power that you're trying to fight?
No.
Because you're then mirroring the same things that you're
I don't think that's always true. I think it can be true. But I think to say that all people who violently resisted empire have become rapists and murderers just isn't accurate.
Of course.
Right? Sometimes, if people are buying and selling your children, it is only normal and logical to do everything in your power to kill those people. That is the normal, loving human reaction to another human being trying to kidnap your child and sell them into slavery.
But then this is why we have the wars that we have, because it's counter revenge.
Yeah, but like I said, I believe, we have the wars we have because of greed and belief in European supremacy and that we can bomb any brown country into the Stone Age if they have oil that we want or they decide to nationalise their minerals or whatever other crap. That has been really since the 1950s. If we look at the wars that have been fought around the globe, a lot of proxy wars, of course some individual wars that have occurred with nothing to do with Europe, and then many wars of just America and often Britain just bombing whoever they feel like, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, because we just didn't like what they were doing and they were a bit brown, right? the Vietnamese had every right to kill every American soldier that landed in their country.
Okay.
What would British people do if ISIS land in London tomorrow?
Yeah.
And they're going to say, oh, well, you know, we shouldn't resist. No, goddamn way they're not. They're going to say to the army and to the Prime Minister, you best kill every single one of them people that's just landed in this country right now. And they will celebrate it. And then we let these same people patronize us into saying we shouldn't glorify our ancestors' resistance to their brutality. If you're a brave warrior, you came to our country, you killed lots of us, you enslaved lots of us, we killed you back, we won, we got free. We might still be poor and struggling in the Caribbean and parts of Africa, but we were never supposed to get independence, let's be clear. Even the limited forms of independence we have. Zimbabwe had to militarily fight to get independence. South Africa had to bring the country to the brink of civil war to get an end to formal apartheid, even though economic apartheid remains. So we have to understand that history moves very slowly, and sadly, oppressors only seem to tend to learn, when their kids' backs are also on fire. I wish it wasn't that way. I wish there was difference, but I'm not going to be one of these romantic people who says, turn the other cheek, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, because I know people only even listen to Gandhi and Martin Luther King, i.e. the powerful, because they knew there were more radical alternatives.
So you feel like violence speaks to violence and that's the only way it can be opposed?
I feel like it's sad, but I'm saying the normal loving human reaction when someone tries to kill your loved ones or harm them is to return in kind. And I am not, and I make no apologies for that, and I believe people have the right to defend their loved ones from violent attack. If someone comes into your house and tries to kill your kids, you have every right to end that person, as far as I'm concerned. And that should be a legally protected right. And the same is true of nations. If someone invades your country, you have every right to resist those occupying soldiers.
So when you started talking about the knowledge seeker, obviously he manages to do his journey through astral projection, a kind of travelling of sorts. Have you kind of delved into that power to be able to step outside our physical self?
I've read about it. I meditate. I've had experiences, but I could never say, officially I've really astral. I know people who have, and they've described it for me. And I've really tried to base a lot of what I've written on written descriptions and some of the studies of shamanism I've had. But I've not done ayahuasca or any of those kind of things, and I've not had those myself full experiences. I dream a lot, and I dream very vividly. And a lot of my perception of otherworldliness and spirituality, I suppose, comes from dreaming. You know, how can people explain dreams? I've dreamt stuff and then gone to a place 3 weeks later and I'll be like, I dreamt this. That is just weird. Like, you cannot explain that to me with rational science.
To me, it comes down to our perceptions of time, because we think time is linear.
No. Europeans think time is linear. We have to be very clear. In the African and Asian and indigenous American and all Oriental world systems, time is cyclical. There isn't life and death. There is a cycle of time, and the ancestors are born and reborn. And if we are aware, we can tap into before time or future time. So we are on a European linear, Greco-Roman, Gregorian calendrical system that tells us, which is very good for the Industrial Revolution, but not so good for human spirituality. And we have to understand there are many ways to understand time. And ironically, the best of Western science, astrophysics, quantum string theory, etc., is now coming to say what these crazy, shamans from Mexico have been saying since the beginning. So it's very interesting the way we're getting this kind of 360 where all this investigative science has come to tell us basically we don't fucking understand reality.
And what we knew before, we're only coming back to realising again. And that idea of the cycle and kind of repetition came through very strongly in your piece, with that kind of, being able to see that something was going to happen and then it happening and it happening again. Do you feel like we're at a stage where we've evolved, or do you feel like we've actually gone a step backwards in our evolution?
I don't know. I think that in some ways humans have evolved. But I mean, this is the only time I know for certain I was alive in. I do believe possibly in reincarnation. I haven't really fully reached a conclusion on it, but energy doesn't die. It only passes. So I believe to a certain degree, I definitely believe in genetic memory. So your ancestors' experiences are born within you, and I suppose that's a form of reincarnation. Whether or not, I don't know, there's quite a lot of evidence to say humans have also devolved. That many parts of our brain, the many aspects of our spirituality, that much of our understanding of nature. You look at a lot of these indigenous people that we say are stupid or this or that, and you look at, they'll be sick and they'll know what herb they need. They'll even know what they need to eat, what's missing from their diet. So they'll go and dig up whichever plant is missing and just
Yeah, and that innate nature we've lost in this Western
Most of us will be like ill and we'll be like paracetamol. Doctor.
Yeah.
But your GP's flabby and sick, bro. Why are you listening to a man that's flabby and sick?
This is it.
Even it's common sense. Humans drink milk.
But
even this amazes me, right? When I tell people I don't drink milk, and they look at me like I'm the crazy one.
I'm
like, humans are the only animal on the earth
another species
that drinks another species' milk. How is that?
You don't even have to go.
How is that even logical? And cow's milk is acid. Human milk is alkaline. Adult cows can't drink cow's milk because it's designed for baby cows.
Exactly.
Yeah, here we are as humans.
And it's not kind of putting two and two together for the diseases that we're experiencing today, for the lifestyles that we're living.
So I think in many ways we've devolved, or we're in a battle with the structure that we live in and our natural innate tendency toward, and I see this as one of the big problems. I see lack of spirituality, even though people want to make you into some kind of, I don't know, voodoo fairy.
They want to vilify spirituality.
Yes, because spirituality is not good for capitalism. Spirituality is not good for white supremacy. Spirituality is not good for the current system as the way it is, because it makes
you step outside of the
it makes people care about more than what the fuck is on the television.
And it makes you realise your power, and therefore you wouldn't take the situation as it sounds.
It helps you cope with your own mortality.
Yeah.
If you are in touch with your spirit, you're less inclined to fear death. And therefore, you're more inclined to be willing to give your life for justice.
Definitely.
And if you look at a lot of the traditional forms of African spirituality, for example, one of the reasons they were so demonized under slavery was because traditional African spiritualists were just like, I'm not going to be a slave, I'm going to jump into the goddamn sea and be reborn. And because they believed they were reborn in Guinea, which is what they used to call Western, they was like, yo, Bridget, I'm taking my youth and I'm jumping in the sea with my slavery move.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So, Pan-African spirituality became dangerous. And if you actually look, the Haitian Revolution, for example, was onset by a traditional African priest and priestess called Bookman and Mambo Cecil Fatima. So they staged a traditional African voodoo ceremony. Here we are, even those of us who are African Caribbean origin, constantly dissing voodoo, when we don't know a goddamn thing about what voodoo really is, other than what Europeans have told us. Oh, it's bad, it's evil, it's black. What the fuck is black magic? Right? So we believe all this crap about our own spiritual systems, when in the case of Haiti, very practically,
that empowered the people.
That empowered many.
Yeah.
And in Brazil, you still have that legacy.
Definitely, and in places like Cuba and parts of the Caribbean, that still exists. I just wondered, in terms of your own personal spirituality, what practices or beliefs you're now in. I know you've got dreadlocks now. Are you?
I'm not Rasta. I would say that dreadlocks are a recognition of an affirmation of Pan-African spirituality, of which Rastafari is a part.
Yes.
But for me, I think, this is just my personal opinion, so no this to no one else, I think Rastafari served a very specific revolutionary purpose for a period of time. But I think belief systems need to evolve. I don't believe any belief system from any period of history has all the answers forever forward in history.
So do you kind of pick and choose?
Yeah, I'm kind of like I don't know what the word is. I'm quite into Hindu spirituality. That doesn't mean I agree with some of the Hindu fascism of the Indian government, but I find the Bhagavad Gita fascinating and a text that really is like a life guide. I read Jiddu Krishnamurti or Taoism from China. One of the beauties of living in the kind of world we live in today, where so much printed work for so many thousands of years of human heritage is available, is that I can read about Native American shamanism and say, right, them had some really clever observations of the universe. That's amazing. I can read about the Dogon or the Yoruba or the ancient Kemetic conceptions, and actually when you start to look deeply, you see a unity, not division, a unity in the best conceptions humans have come up with.
I agree with that.
And so for me, I would define my spirituality as a kind of amalgamation of predominantly Pan-African spiritual systems, but also many Asian and Mesoamerican, and even if we look at the Druidic systems that existed in England before Anglo-Saxon imperialism, we're not allowed to talk about those.
I completely agree with that, and I think that idea of being able to kind of pick and choose as an education now is the benefit that we have of the amount of information that we have with things like the internet, making that so readily available for so many of us. And I just wondered, in your ideas of kind of trying to provoke that challenge to the authorities, when you spoke about kind of growing up, going back to your childhood, how do you see a black person being born in still what we would consider a white supremacist society? What options do you have going through the education system and trying to make a life that is comfortable for yourself, but at the same time one that is true to who you are as a person? And
well, it depends who you are and what you're exposed to. See, the idea that only white people believe in white supremacy is bullshit. There are plenty of black and brown people who, because of their conditioning, actually believe themselves that white people are superior. In Yard, man will say, anything tall black can't good. Every person that bleaches their skin clearly believes light skin. white skin is superior. So there are people who are non-white who believe in white supremacy. So if you have that belief system, you can interact in a society like this and not even notice that there are certain white supremacist assumptions at the foundation. And when you use a word like white supremacy, everyone gets all uptight and all like, oh my God, did he just say white supremacy? Is he calling me a Ku Klux Klan member? But unapologetically, really prior to World War II, even really up to the 60s and 70s, the top thinkers of the white world were unapologetically saying white people are superior. What do you want me to do?
And I didn't build the foundation.
I didn't invent it. I didn't make these people say this stuff. They argued that white people were superior, and we're dealing with the legacy. So don't blame me because I'm using the correct terminology.
For what it is.
They didn't say one race is superior to another. They said the white race is superior. And Hitler, who everyone wants to demonize as the worst guy in the world, that was his ideology. Jews were to die because they were not Aryan, they were not white. And so the legacy of that is that it's difficult if you are the kind of person that is lucky enough to be exposed to a different narrative like I was. I went to a Pan-African Saturday school as a child. Even if you're just a natural questioner, you're going to say, well, this isn't justice. How did Africa come to be where it is in the world today? How did Europe come to be where it is in the world today? How did the world come to be shaped by this ideology that black skin is less valuable, and it is a global ideology, which is why what's happening in West Papua will not make the news. What's happening in the Congo will not make the news. Black lives in America might make the news, but it ain't going to stop them kids getting shot in the face. And they're only making the news because they're black people in the richest, most powerful country in the world. Afro-Brazilians, more of them get killed by the police than African Americans, no big deal. So this ideology is a global idea. If you respect yourself as a human, whatever your shape, you're going to resist injustice. But particularly if you're a person of colour, and particularly as a black person, you're going to say, hold on a minute, this system is globally killing people that look like me. If I have an ounce of fucking self-respect inside my skin, I'm going to do or say something, even if I'm not going to go out and be an all-out revolution. So for me, trying to live a life, and this is what I was saying to people earlier, we actually think kissing arse is going to get us somewhere. Ironically, often, not all the time, people respect people that respect themselves. So ironically, as an artist, I've been successful in this country, partly because I just really don't give a shit what people think of me. And the less and less I give a shit, the more and more I just say what's on my mind, the more and more people respect me. It's so ironic. If you look at someone like Muhammad Ali, I'm never comparing myself to him in a million years. He was demonized for that 3 years that he was banned. But he became a part of 20th century history.
Because he spoke
that everyone respects for the stand he took. Even though at the time people hated on him, they said, you know what, even if we don't agree with him, even men who fought in the American wars have been like, I respect what he put his money, his life, his fame on the line for something he believed. The irony is that actually I don't think you can get far in this life by kissing ass because it doesn't sit with your spirit. So there are challenges when all the positions of employment and power are owned and controlled by people that don't look like you.
This is what I was going to say.
When fitting in the workplace is difficult, but as I said to the person earlier, take 2 sets of notes. So if you're in a workplace you're uncomfortable with, that might just be your cross to bear, and that might be what you've got to deal with for a period of time. And you've got to find a way to keep your spirit and to not let that workplace consume you, because you do have to earn a living.
But then it's living the double life, the Francis Fanon double mask.
Or what Web Du Bois talked about, double consciousness.
Exactly.
That's our cross to bear. Don't think it's all easy. But don't think it's all easy and swimming for white people. Being taught that you're innately superior, and then having to be in a class with a Ghanaian kid who's 100 times smarter than you. That's not an easy cross to bear. I went through that stuff at primary school, where the rich kids' parents were kind of like, how are you going to let kids pass in the test again? When school teachers were threatened by the fact that I was clever. How can you be threatened by the intelligence of a 7-year-old to the point you'll put him in a special needs group with kids that don't speak English? Because people like him are not supposed to be clever. So I don't think we should think just power systems. Just because people are in a power system that serves them, that everything's wonderful. Whose kids in America are running in their schools and shooting up masses of kids in secondary school, predominantly middle-class white children? We look at...
So everybody has their own...
Everyone has their cross to bear. And we shouldn't think just because people look powerful and privileged and life seems good, that everything is wonderful, because it isn't. There's depression, there's anxiety, there's drug addiction, there's the fear of like, oh my God, when are these black and brown people going to wake up and come for me? Don't think people don't have that fear, because they do. That is the fear of when will my comeuppance come.
So do you feel that this is a guilt, or do you feel like this is an evolutionary fear? Do you subscribe to some of the ideas of Francis Cress Welsing, or is it more...
I'm not sure. I think Dr. Welsing has some very interesting points, but I'm not sure. I'd need her to flesh it out a bit more for me, in the sense that I think part of what she's saying is probably scientifically correct, because if you look at what the open white supremacists are saying, they're saying that they fear extinction. So they've said that. She didn't make that up. They've openly said, we don't want to be bred out by black and brown people, we don't want to turn brown. that's why we're going to have segregation. But then there's also the fact that racism hasn't always existed. So it isn't just an evolutionary fear. In ancient Greece and ancient Rome, we can't have our cake and eat it.
Yeah.
We can't say Greeks came to Africa and learned, and then say Europeans have always thought Africans were inferior.
Yeah.
We can't have our cake and eat it.
That wasn't the case.
I can show you thousands, literally thousands of pictures of Africans painted in ancient Greece and Roman society. They're not painted as inferior slave-based objects. There is actually a lot of evidence to suggest there was more respect for black Africans than there was for Northern and Western Europeans, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, who the Greeks and the Romans considered barbarians. Because those people didn't have civilizations yet. No one wants to deal with that today. So I think racism evolved partly as a result of colonialism, partly of Europeans traveling the world and realizing, shit, everyone else in the world doesn't look like us.
So more of a justification of the...
And it became a justification, and now it has this genetic imperative that many people talk about. This biological imperative that people talk about, and it's really, we can all get on even though we look different and have a multicultural audience, but that isn't going to change the fact that ethnically specific pathogens are being invented by scientists that are only going to poison particular groups of people. So there is some real deep dark shit, even though this is not exactly what the book's about. It's part of what it's about.
And it does start to
talks about the destruction of humanity. It talks about the fact that people thinking they're going to be saved because they live in rich countries is misguided. It talks about really total destruction of humanity and deliberately is quite shocking and provocative. It also has a story in it set in the Haitian Revolution, and another story based on real history but fictionalized, and then a story set in working class resistance to the Industrial Revolution. It tries to really provoke people to think about the role that resistance to empire has played also in forming history. Because also we're often taught empire. Empire made all the history. No, what empire had to sit itself down at certain points. And what is it that people did to make empire do so?
I hear that, and I appreciate you for writing it. And we definitely enjoyed kind of hearing the ideas that you're working on at the moment. Where can we see this in its next form?
So I couldn't tell you that yet. I'm going to be touring in April. But that will be a normal Akala music tour where we perform songs. This we're currently working on evolving into the Ruins of Empire stage production. And I don't know when that will be yet. Hopefully late 2015, but don't hold me to that.
Well, whenever it is, we will definitely be there, and we wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.